Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Magic Hour podcast. I'm your host, Shireen Campbell, and I'm the founder of My Little Magic Shop. One day, I lit a candle and asked for clarity in my professional and life path. Soon after, I was gifted with the message that I'm here to help others go through exactly what I was going through then. And just like that, My Little Magic Shop and the Magic Hour podcast was born. Our guest today is Tao practitioner, author, and artist development coach, Emileena. Welcome, Emileena. I'm so thrilled to have you as a guest.
Yay, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Of course. All right. So here on the Magic Hour, I love to take it all the way back. Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing? Like, where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area, California, and I was coming of age right in the middle of the wild, wild west of the dot-com boom. So, so here I was, this artist in the heart of Silicon Valley, amongst all these like computer programmers and gamers and pretty much everyone more tech savvy than I was. As an artist. And so I was just trying to find my own way. And, but it was a really exciting time. Within like just a few miles of where I grew up now is the Google campus, Facebook, Apple, HP is still there. HP was always there. It's just like, that's the heart, that's the hub of everything. So it's kind of crazy that I went into the arts, but I really believed during that time, because it was such an exciting time, that I could translate, because everyone was making money. This was in the 90s. And so I really believed that I could translate that to the arts. And it was not as easy as I thought it was going to be. So that was the launch of my journey.
That totally makes sense. Like, I can't imagine, being around so many people who are, like nerds for all intents and purposes. They're into like science and math and, like computers and all of that stuff, and being like, I like to make things beautiful and, talk like on the more feminine energy side. So I imagine that must have been so difficult, being so different and like knowing you have something just as special to share with the world, that was out of the norm. So like I'm just like, what an interesting, upbringing. And then on the other hand, it's great because you're around all of this innovation and like people thinking outside of the box and, people thinking in a different way creatively. So that must have been inspirational as well.
Yeah.
So just like, did you, in terms of like your parents, like, do you have siblings? Like, what was like home life like for you?
Yeah, well, definitely middle class, back when there was still a middle class, I suppose. And I grew up Christian, but I never really resonated with Christianity, which is why I probably ended up with Taoism. But my dad has always been kind of into Eastern religions, because he had lived in India for Peace Corps. So, we definitely, and actually he took us, both my parents took us to Japan and India when I was 10. So I was definitely exposed to a lot of different cultures, and a very spiritual family. My sister especially, there was a lot of talk in my household of like angels and aliens. So, like when I was a kid, there was one time when I had a lot of stomach problems, and I remember my sister and my mom sitting me down and saying, it could be aliens, like doing tests on you. And I was like, what? But because I was so young, and they were like, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I was like, okay. So I definitely grew up with kind of an open mind to all things.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that so much. It's so funny. My dad and I, like, that's one of our favorite topics to talk about. We both are obsessed with ancient aliens. So
Yes,
so I can totally picture like little Emileena like what?
Yeah, we'd watch that all as a family. We'd watch ancient, maybe not ancient aliens, but all the alien shows, it was fun.
Oh, I love it. That's amazing though. I'm super excited you had such like open-minded parents. So like I'm pretty sure that, like as you got further into, Taoism and, spirituality, they're just like, whatever, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so I read in your bio that, one of your most transformational moments happened in Peru. Would you tell us a little bit, more about well, actually, I skipped a little bit. getting too ahead of myself. So tell me about life, a little bit more about life before, like immediately before Peru. Like, what were you doing? What were your goals? Like, who was Emileena before?
Okay, well, I was definitely work hard, play hard, go back to work. Work always came first. I remember I told all my relationships, like all my boyfriends, as soon as we started going out, work comes first, just so you know. So, yeah, very work oriented. I originally moved to New York to try to be a stage manager on Broadway because theater was my background. I was doing theater. Um, and then I transitioned into producing because a mentor of mine told me he saw the producer glint in my eye. So he was right. And so then I launched my theater company primarily for producing. And I was determined to merge the theater and music industries to create alternative producing models for live events. And because what I'd learned about the commercial theater was that it didn't make a lot of business sense and it wasn't making money, like 1 in 5 at the time, 1 in 5 shows on Broadway was recouping. And
Wow.
so it just didn't make financial sense. And so so that was definitely where I was trying to navigate this like behemoth of an industry, in New York City and trying to pave my own way. And my ultimate goal was to build my own venue that would be a multi-stage, flexible use venue dedicated to producing these types of non-traditional productions. And of course, I wanted to do it in the heart of Manhattan. So I was like thinking big. And then when things didn't quite go my way, which is in hindsight, it's like, well, what did you expect? That I was just gonna, build this huge venue overnight? And everyone said to me at the time, they're like, but you've never done anything, because I was asking, like courting investors, and they're like, but you've never done anything that big. So why would we just write out a check? And I was like, but I have all the financials, it's $50 million. I just need you to give me $10 million, as if it was like no big deal. So but anyway, so that did not go as smoothly as I liked. So I got really jaded very fast on business. As New York can do that to you, and just New York in general. I mean, I never hated New York, but just really like tired of the rat race. So I kind of went to Peru looking for like to just reconnect with something more meaningful. Like I knew that in my heart that life wasn't about the hustle, but I didn't feel that. I didn't connect, like, and there was a disconnect there for me. So I guess I was just kind of looking for the meaning of life, I guess. And then also I was okay. Like I didn't know much about ayahuasca when I went. I just heard that it was the equivalent of 6 years of therapy. Oh, no, 10 or 20 years of therapy in 6 hours. And I was like, sign me up. Because everyone had been, like, my family had been saying, you really need to go to therapy. And I was like, I don't have time for that, because, I was in the rat race of New York City. So yeah, it was, and then, and I didn't know much about it, except that it was kind of dangerous. And so there was a chance that I might, there was a couple people who had died from it. So I was like, okay. So, like part of me was also going to die because I really didn't care. I was so disconnected from, like feelings. I was just so caught up in the like trying to get in the hustle, So that was kind of where I was when I went to Peru.
Oh, I mean, I feel like that probably resonates with so many people, even just, especially those that live in the big cities, with these big goals and dreams. And like, I mean, I love that you think big, like I think that, I feel like not enough people think big, but it's like sometimes when you do think so big, it can be a little bit easier to get like bummed out or jaded or like not know which way to turn. And then often it's like easier to kind of just keep going and keep going and keep going, opposed to like taking a step back. So I love that you were brave enough to, embark on something so different and drastic and life changing, because like, yeah, you're like, yeah, it'll be therapy really fast, but at the same time that means that like you are going to uncover a ton of stuff about yourself in a really short amount of time. So like that, to me, like that's incredibly brave to be able to do that. Okay, so tell me, I want in as much detail as you possibly can, like how, so like, you know, you got on the plane, you were like, I'm going to Peru, and then what happened?
Yeah. Well, my dad joined me actually because my mom guilted him into it, I think, actually. Because they were like, there's no way you're doing this by yourself. I was like, okay, fine. So my dad met me there, and I immediately got food poisoning. So I was sick, and altitude sickness. And then, you know, you're also supposed to be like fasting for the first, like the day before. And I'd already been on like a certain diet. So for like the week, so I was so weak and kind of disoriented. And the day that I was supposed to go to the retreat, they came to pick me up at the hotel, and there was a tree that had fallen, like it was up in the mountains, and there was a tree that had fallen to block the road. And you know, there it's like, it's here, that's not a big deal. There it was a really big deal. And I remember coming up to it, and the people were kind of like trying to cut it down, you know, like apart. And there were just like a few workers, you know, people trying to get rid of it, this huge tree. So they turned back around, and I ended up missing a whole day. I was really upset, and I was like, this is a metaphor for my life, you know, like nothing is going right. There's literally a tree blocking my way, you know?
Yeah.
So, which, you know, it was the perfect metaphor. But then I made it the next day, and it was really disoriented. In fact, I think I wasn't supposed to eat, but I think I kind of convinced them to give me something like berries or something, because I was like, I am so hungry and kind of like anemic, and I felt really sick. And then there were 2 nights that I did the ceremony. The first night, not too much happened. But I did experience this like sun energy, which was really great. Like the sun god, you know, because you know, we're rich in like Inca environment there, and the Incan culture and lore and all of that. And I definitely could feel that, which is really nice. You know, part of ayahuasca is that you become part of the land. I mean, you're drinking this medicine from the land, and it's like you kind of feel it. So it was really nice. And then the second night is when I think they gave me more too the second night to like bump it up. And oh my God. So I visited another dimension, and I received messages about the earth and about the birth of creation and ideas, which I was not able to articulate at the time. I have now like done a lot of sessions, you know, like kind of regressions to figure out what it meant. And at the time I remember saying like, I don't know what this means. What does this mean? You know, I was very pre-Peru. Emileena was very impatient and, you know, wanted to get to the point. So I was like, what does this mean? And of course, I didn't get any explanation. I got visuals. It was all visuals. But definitely about the earth and about creation, and then I purged like all the negativity. That's what it felt like. It just felt like coming out of my body was it was negativity, because there was no food in me, and you know, purging is a part of the ritual. And so it was just, you know, and then when I would feel bad, the shaman would come around and be like, drink some more water. So it was water coming out literally, but it felt like it was negativity coming out. And then the second that I kind of got all of it out, I felt like I experienced love in a way that is indescribable. Like this kind of universal love. Like you could also call it source, I guess, you know, or like the spirit world, but it was just so powerful and loving. And that's something that I was disconnected from, you know, and I had written in my journal, I had wanted to kind of discover this idea of love, because I knew life was about love. I just didn't feel it. So I felt it in this really like visceral way. And, you know, they had told me before the ceremony, like, let yourself die. Don't be afraid to die. And I think, and there was definitely times during the ceremony where I felt like, especially when I was going to another dimension, where I was like, okay, I guess I have to let myself die, you know, which I was in an okay place at that time to do. But I think if I hadn't been willing to do that, I wouldn't have been able to receive the love, you know? So it's like a combination of letting myself die. I mean, I think it was ego death at the end of the day. That's what was happening. And it really changed my life, you know? And I will say that ego that term ego death is very confusing to me, because ego never goes away completely. So even though in that moment it was ego death, I mean, obviously the ego is still around, but yeah, the love, God, it felt so good. And then afterwards I just felt like immediately I wasn't sick anymore.
Wow.
Like it had just completely went away. Like the whole day, after the first ceremony, the whole day, then the whole next day, I was sick. And I was just like, new people came, and they even commented, because all these new people came to the retreat and saw me like in a corner. I think I was journaling, but I was miserable. And then the next day I was this bubble of love. That's what it felt like. And they were like, whoa, you're a different person today. I was like, yeah, it feels great. And we went around to share our experiences. And I said, and everyone kind of went in with an intention.
Mhm.
And when they got to me, I said, the answer to everyone's issues here, like the answer to everything is love. Like I'm telling you, the answer is love. And it's true, even to this day, and so I've really been able to retain that, which is nice. That bubble of love really kind of deflated, especially after returning to the concrete jungle of New York City. But so I some days I miss that bubble, because it just felt so good. But I know now that it's always inside me. And that was part of what I learned too, is that came from inside of me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was really amazing.
That's really beautiful. And so, do you feel like you got a little bit more clarity in terms of your purpose and like what it is that you like your next steps? Like, so like you released all of this gunk and junk and negativity and like build up, and then obviously with all that release comes space to be able to create something new. So, like, did you, was it like pretty much like in ceremony, or was it immediately following ceremony, or was it when you got home that you kind of were just like, I got it. I know what's next.
That's a really good question, because I know in my bio, I like sum it up by saying, I discovered my purpose, but it actually didn't happen for months, I'd say, because I was kind of, while I was in that, I mean, they say ayahuasca stays in your body for 6 months. So I'd say, and I felt kind of like I was in that bubble for about 6 months, I'd say. And while I was there, I really didn't care anymore. I didn't care about the rat race. I didn't care about anything other than love and loving people and connecting, and connection and all of that. And so I trusted that space, and I stayed there for a long time. And I eventually kind of became inspired again by artists and arts, because that's definitely where my heart is. And then I kind of realized that connection is where my purpose was. That working with artists and helping them find sustainability. So that's what it's translated to, but I think it's the connection from like pre-Peru and post-Peru is there's, in the theater especially, is a collaborative art form. Now I work with artists across discipline, but I think the thorough line to my work, even as a producer, part of the reason why I liked producing was that I was working with everyone, including the actors. I still got to know all the actors for the productions that I produced. So so I think it's that kind of human connection that I really like. And now I focus on helping artists find a stable way to pursue their passion, just because that's what I didn't have. I had to go to Peru to find that, and I had to purge all this negativity. And actually, that's what my book is about too, is because I believe that our society, even though we understand, and this is specifically in America, because I can't speak as much to other countries, but we understand as a culture that the arts are important, but we treat our artists terrible. There's all this underfunding. And the first thing out of most parents, I mean, I was very lucky to have supportive parents, but I remember when I graduated high school, a lot of my friends whose parents were not supportive of them pursuing the arts. And people tell their kids all the time, make sure you have a fallback career or a day job, or, and it's like, what kind of messaging are we telling people who want to pursue their passion? And that's where I had my fight, I feel like. And that's where it was so difficult. So I think my purpose has now become, well, I mean, I would really, what I call it vision, my vision. And I say my vision is to like end the exploitation of artists, which that's basically what we're talking about. The idea of society kind of, it's exploitation at the end of the day. And part of the reason why I think artists are so get exploited a lot is because we have been trained to think that we need somebody else to do all our business affairs for us, you know? And then again, when you look at all, like in my experience, it was the theater. When you start getting up to the business side of it, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make business sense. It's like there's business and then there's arts business. And arts business is all about this lack mentality, you know, begging for money in the nonprofits. And I apologize. The nonprofits always get so mad at me for saying that. But, you know, I'm kind of exaggerating to make a point, though. And so I think my purpose is really to help one-on-one artists, hashtag one artist at a time, really build up their own sustainability. It's like a DIY careers in the arts. That's what I want to, that's what I'm working to help artists with.
Oh, I love that so much. I think that it's definitely needed. And like, there is a lot of messaging in our society. Like, that was not growing up, that was not an option. So my mom told me, she'll probably argue this, but like very, and it could be just because I'm, of Jamaican heritage, but it's very much like you're gonna be a doctor, a lawyer, or I forget what the third one was. It was probably like engineer or accountant or something like that. But like those are your options because you are not going to be poor. Like
Right,
so, and
exactly.
like you think about the messaging of that, and it's like there are people that are born with gifted you know senses, and like all those things are wonderful, they're needed, we need doctors and lawyers and like all of that, but like also there are people that have purely come to show love in a different way, and to like help with us understanding and connecting with our emotions, in different, in like ways that like are untraditional, and it's necessary. Because you think of something like music, for instance, right? Like music is so like I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you're like this, but like every amazing trip I've had on had a theme song, right? So music
Nice.
is like so, and like you can think of most like the most important events in your life, like I can always think of a song that reminds me of that, of that particular moment. But like I think that those like art is just such an important part of society, and I'm sure there's like tons of studies about like art, going back centuries upon centuries, and like how they helped and aided people to continue to want to evolve and continue to, be able to survive being on
Yeah.
earth, being on earth, especially when times are really difficult. So it is really important. I definitely think it's undervalued. So I super appreciate that there are people like you out there, like really advocating for, the artists to be paid as much as a lawyer or a doctor, whatever the traditional thing is. And then also like the conversation about lack mentality, like when you grow up being told that your gifts are somehow like worth less
Mhm.
than the gifts of the more traditionally acceptable careers, like that does make you feel like, oh, like I can't, like how dare I demand more money for, this work of art. In theory, it's like they're equal because they're both, they're both of value, just different types of value. So I am not an artist per se, but it totally speaks to my heart, and I love that. So
Yeah.
you go through this like really beautiful awakening. You have your ceremony, and then for the next 6 months, you're kind of just like, living in love and allowing things to come to you. And you come to like kind of this beautiful thought process and purpose and feel really grounded in that. So, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about how does Taoism come into play? And then first, if you don't mind clarifying, what Taoism is for anybody who's like never heard the term before. Like I know I was saying Taoism, and then someone told me that it's Taoism, and then I was like, what the heck does that even mean? So like just share with our listeners, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there is no literal translation of the letter that starts Taoism. So it's a T or a D. It can be either one.
Okay.
I like to clarify that because I tend to use D because it's phonetic, but people always try to correct me on that. And I'm like, well, technically it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But that's actually, again, another kind of metaphor for what I love about the philosophy. So the thing about Taoism is all about balance, I'd say. And the Tao is the way or the path. And, there's this belief that we all have our own, like, there's only one path, but it looks different for each one of us. And that's really what drew me to Taoism, because it's not like it's this or that. It's not like you can't like Catholicism is wrong, or Christianity is wrong, or whatever. It actually, Taoism was the one kind of philosophy that I found that allows for everything. So it's very flexible and open, and it's hard to talk about. And actually, there's a great quote from Benjamin Hoff, who wrote The Tao of Pooh, which, for anyone who wants to learn more about it, I definitely recommend it, because it's so easily digestible in The Tao of Pooh. But there's a quote in the very beginning where he says, it's very hard to talk about Taoism. It's easier to talk around it, but for those who identify with it and resonate with it, it's like, it's undeniable. And that's like how I came into it. Like, I feel like I started living and being a Taoist before I even understood what that meant. And even now, sometimes people will quote to me the Tao Te Ching, and like, I haven't actually read the Tao Te Ching in years, although it's on my list. I'm going to read it again. But I'm like, oh yeah, I get it immediately, because it's this idea of a path, and the path is like the divinity in Taoism is this path, and the path, I'd say, is really is balance, that place of balance, and it's also being present in the moment, I think. And but it's up to interpretation. My Tao might look different to someone else's Tao, and so it's just about finding quieting the brain, I'd say, and finding the path. I mean, if that helps at all. I always struggle explaining what Taoism is.
Yeah.
The short answer is it's about balance.
Yeah. I think I feel like most people have a hard time explaining it. But I feel like that's kind of the beauty of it too, right?
Exactly.
And I love how you said about, like, all the paths are more or less the same, but everyone has their different way of approaching it. And I feel like that's, something that's like really, that's such a good thing to remember, like, as even if you try to compare yourself to another person, you're like, nope, I have mine and they have theirs, or like you're trying to tell someone how they should live their path. Like, everyone has their own situation, but we're all kind of marching towards the same direction, which I think that's really beautiful. So tell me, like, a little bit about how you got into it.
Yeah. So I discovered it at a comparative religion class in college. And again, like, what I just liked it because, I grew up Christian, and I went to Sunday school, and they told us all these things about what we had to do to be a good Christian. And I just didn't like that. And, Taoism was born out of the rigidity of Confucianism, which at the time was a militaristic religion, and it was taught in schools, and it was about like worshiping your ancestors, and it was very, like, if you did it wrong, you were punished, and it was all about, right and wrong, and and then in response to that rigidity came Taoism. And so I think that's definitely what drew me to it. Is not that I had this super rigid life, but I've never, like, the artist in me has never liked boxes, and, like, for instance, oh, you can't be an artist, or oh, you need a day job, or whatever. I'm like, you can't tell me that, so that's what drew me to Taoism. And but I read the Tao Te Ching in college, and it's interesting going back and reading my notes, and I was like, oh, I'm not sure I really got it, because it's so ambiguous. It's like, I feel like the Tao Te Ching is really just a bunch of extremes put right next to each other, and again, the idea is to find balance. So it might say, a passage might say something like, life is really hard, life is really easy, like, right next to each other, and you're like, what the fuck, right? But pardon my language. It's like through a whole thing, and a lot of people just don't understand it. They want to be told, see, that's also why I think I like it, because they want the rigidity. A lot of people want to be told specifically what it means. What I like about it is because if you kind of sit and contemplate both extremes, and this goes for anything, I believe this is the philosophy in a nutshell, then you can find the middle. So I always say it's like 3 bounces, and 3 is this very sacred number, like the Holy Trinity. But if you can bounce to one extreme and then bounce to the other extreme, and that you will eventually find the middle. But you have to do both. Like, a lot of people will get lost. Like, one might go, they either they get stuck in the first extreme, or they like buck that extreme and go to the other extreme, and then they're comfortable because they've already been through the process of bucking it, but it's like, no, you got to do it one more time, and you come back to the center. And that is the Tao. That's the path, So,
I love that. And because I'm a Libra, so like that totally resonates with me so
yeah,
much.
yeah. Yeah, can't put you in a box either. Yeah.
I'm like always like, but there's this. I find myself doing that so much in life, like one extreme and then the next, and I'm like, okay, no, somewhere in the middle. Has to
Right.
be somewhere in the middle. So I love that. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Wow. And so you were introduced to that through college, and then it sounds like throughout the years it kind of just like stuck with you. And this
Yeah, just
caused
like
you
a little
to
bit.
write a book, right?
Yeah. And actually, I will say one other thing too. So when I got back from Peru was kind of when I reconnected with it again. And it offered to me this like key to sustainability, which is like there were kind of four things that I found in it. One is this release of when you're kind of in this place of Tao in that center, there's a release of judgment, which feels really good, so like in that place there is no, oh, you can't, like that's judgment, or that's wrong that you're doing that. Well, that's a judgment. So there's a release of judgment. There's also love, so and loving yourself. And so that's also what I found in it. Like it gave me this space to love myself, which felt really good and different and foreign, because I feel like we're also taught to give to others. It's more important to give to others than to like give to ourselves. And gratitude, like sitting in gratitude, and then also staying present, which is really big for me too, because like I tend to get either caught up in like whenever I'm unhappy, it's either about something like a cycle or a trend that's happened in the past, or about worrying about something that's going to happen in the future. So when I can kind of drop into the Tao in that present moment, in this place of love and no judgment and gratitude, it's like that just feels really good. And actually, to bring it back to my book, so that's what the book is about how to find sustainability in a career in the arts. And the key to sustainability, I would say, is to drop into that center place, is to drop into that Tao and be able to have the tools to get there. Now I call it Tao. Some people might not call it Tao. That's why I also like to call it balance. It's really just about balance, but having the tools to kind of drop into that place is what I believe will kind of lead you to sustainability. And so when I decided to write the book, I decided to use Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey template, which I had found from like a 15-minute YouTube video, which again, in hindsight, I'm like, damn, I always do this. I knew nothing about it. Like the fact that I thought, I was like, oh yes, from a 15-minute YouTube video. So like for the first 2 years, I didn't do any writing. I was really just learning. I had to read Joseph Campbell's A Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is not an easy read, let me tell you. So, that, and like computing all that, but it was like so complimentary. And he actually talks about Taoism sometimes in the book. And so that template I find is really convenient when trying to, well, it's a story of becoming, right? It's a story about transcendence and like finding yourself. I also put it, it's also about fighting the ego, because there's in the hero's journey, there's the cave where you go into, and that's where the epic battle is, and that epic battle is with ego, is basically my interpretation. And that's something that artists also really struggle with, I think, a lot of times. I always say like the biggest, if my goal as a coach is to help artists become sustainable, my biggest competition is ego, because ego is what gets all of our own way. That's what got in my way, So then kind of combating that ego and learning that balance, but also remembering that development never ends. I think that's also a huge lesson for me, because it's like we naturally want it to be over. We want the hard stuff to be over. That's why people don't want to bounce back again, because it's like, I've done all this hard work. Like, what do you mean I don't? Like I went to Peru and I threw up and I did all this intense stuff, and it's like, what? I'm not like, I don't get to live in love forever, no. And like I fought my ego, and it's still here, and it'll still like, and I did so much ego work, and it's still like, I'm like, damn it, ego, you still got me, so yeah, I think that's also, and which has been such a challenge in writing the book, because I'm like, well, where do I begin if the story never ends? And also I think circular. So like and not linear. So I like wrote it once, and then I had to go through it again to fill in all the pieces, like, you know, like a rough skeleton. And then I'm filling in the pieces, and I'm still in the editing process. Actually, I thought I was ready to release until an editor came on board, and I was like, whoa, lots of editing to do. But yeah, so, it's a journey. It's all a journey.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if I had to sum up, like, one of the biggest lessons astrology taught me is that everything's cyclical, right? So like there's this sense that like you said, like you're like, oh, I did all this hard work. I should feel like, oh, it's just light and love from now on. And it's like one thing about astrology tells you that you're always building on previous lessons. So like, yeah, good job. You did that first step. But like, in another cycle, you're going to do the next iteration of that. And then you're just going to continue doing iteration after iteration. You're going to get better and better and better at it, with each pass. But it's kind of like never really over to some extent, which is like, I feel like, but once you accept that every time that it comes up again, you're just like, oh, okay, it's time to learn that again, or it's time to
Right.
deepen my understanding.
Yeah, and that acceptance is like, that's when I say you're in the Tao.
Yeah.
When you can settle into that place of acceptance, like releasing judgment
Yeah.
of like how far you've come, how far you have to go, that is the Tao. That's why I think that's the key. That's what we need to keep coming back to in order to find sustainability.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so now that you have all this beautiful experience, if you could go back to your younger first learning all of this stuff, so like Emileena pre-Peru, what type of advice would you give to yourself?
Well, that's, oh God, that's crazy. What's crazy about it is that my spirit guide spoke to me when I was in college through a friend, actually, and he told me everything I would say to myself, but I couldn't hear it. And so it's like, you really have to be at a place to hear it. But I think what I would say is, I would say, like, cultivate patience and love yourself, and development never ends, but I feel like I was told that and I still didn't believe it. So, you really have to just, and like my mom, when I was, having my struggling in New York before Peru, my mom was like, well, I told you life wasn't going to be easy. And I was like, well, yeah, our life's not fair. She's like, I told you life wasn't, I've always said from, like growing up, life is not fair. Life's not fair. I'm like, yeah, I know you said that, but I thought that's just something that parents say. I didn't know that it was true.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't hear it sometimes. So I think, like, that's why I would just say, like, cultivate patience. Like, that's something you can do. And love yourself
Yeah.
if you can't, like, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think, yeah, patience. Woo, that is one.
I'm still working on that, still cultivating that.
That's gonna be one of those cyclical, lifelong like
Yeah.
situations for me.
Yeah, I hear
Okay.
you.
So what other tips would you give like all our newbies out there that are really, first learning about Taoism or are thinking about, going through a life altering experience in Peru, or, are artists that are really just trying to find their way to sustainability?
Well, I'd say find your tools and keep them at your side, and don't compromise them for other people, because, for a job, for instance, like, for instance, an agent comes, or, it's for artists, an agent, or like that dream job, or a record label, or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden they throw everything out the window because they want the job. So it's like, don't compromise. Find your tools. Remember that every discomfort you feel is ego. So, it's ego making that judgment. And so drop into heart. This is what I try to do, like, drop into your heart and listen to your heart and try to follow your heart. And if your brain is resisting, that's the ego. And, remember that the ego never dies, but, try to, like, stay in your heart. Because in general, I think it's safe to say that the heart doesn't tend to steer you wrong. And it's okay to not know if you don't know, but to just quiet the mind, because when the time is right, you will know, and meditation. Make meditation a regular practice, because that's the quieting the mind, that's quieting the ego. And when you do that, then things start to become so much clearer. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
love that. I think definitely taking a pause, like meditation, whatever it is like so helpful, especially when you're kind of going through chaos, because it's like you're creating an eye of the storm, where instead of being like whipped around by the wind and the water or whatever is happening, like you've made an eye and you're like, nope, I'm going to be in stillness so I can see what's going to happen next. So I love that piece of advice.
that's the Tao, the
Yeah,
eye of the storm. I love that.
I love that. And I guess oh yeah. So, if for anyone who is, I guess just a little bit more advice for like artists out there. So like, dropping into that space, and like one thing you mentioned a minute ago is about tools. So like, can you give like some suggestions in terms of tools, that like what exactly you mean by tools, just for some clarity there?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, well, one tool I'd say is like gratitude. Like you can always go back to gratitude, no matter where, when, how angry you are. And it's hard, but like if you're angry, you can always stop and like, okay, well, what actually am I grateful for right now? Because because like all you can see is red.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you had a really great meal that day, or you have a bed to go home to sleep in, you have air to breathe, like there's always something to be grateful for. I love it.
Hot showers.
There you go, exactly. Yeah, hot showers,
Yeah.
yeah. So and when you can focus on that gratitude stuff, your vibration changes, and so that's a great tool. um movement. I think physical movement, getting your blood flowing. A friend of mine said to try to get my head. She's like a yoga teacher, and she said get your head down below your knees every day. I try to do that because, again, keeping the blood flowing helps it easier to drop into your heart. I've always believed that my body's a sacred temple. So take care of your body, because it's a temple, and what it is housing is, your precious soul, and that inside there is that eye of the storm, and so as long as your carriage is healthy, then it's easier to drop into the Tao, I think. And that's something that you can, like exercise is a great release of stress, all of that. So I'd say movement is a good one. Diet is really good. I've found that my personality changes if I eat a lot of junk food and a lot of crap food. Now, I have not given up junk food or fast food, which I respect and definitely think it's a great idea, but I have not yet been able to totally give it up. But all things in moderation, and I also recognize that it does affect my personality. So like sugar, caffeine, all that stuff. And then there's some that I kind of talk about in my book that I've kind of labeled. Like there's one called the mirror effect that I really like. And that's the idea, is to use the people that are around you and your circumstance and everything that's around you as a mirror for what's going on inside of you. It's kind of like, well, that's the next tool, but so like if you don't like somebody, or if you're angry with somebody, well, then look at what that is reflecting inside. This is maybe higher level and it's harder to do, but like there's probably something inside of you that's reacting that way. And since you can't change that person, look inside of you. So that's kind of this idea of the mirror effect, and same with circumstances. And then lastly, I guess I could say, actually two more. One is, what I do is energy cleansing. So like I have an energy list, a playlist that I can listen to, and it feels like I'm cleansing my energy, which is, I'm also an empath. So sometimes I just need to figure out whether I'm angry because I'm angry or because I'm picking up somebody else's anger. Yep. So, cleansing is really good. Energy and music is great for that. And then lastly, this one's more controversial, but have you heard of simulation theory?
No.
I won't go into too many details. It's very scientific, but it's basically like the matrix, the idea that we all live in a matrix, and that everything is kind of here for us. Like life is a gift, including all of those moments that really piss you off. That's a gift, where you have the opportunity to transform yourself and to grow out of that. So if you can really start, so I use that as a tool. I mean, I think it's a slippery slope, because sometimes people could say, well, if everything's for me, then I get to just use and abuse, basically, which is definitely not what I'm saying. No, no, that's not the point.
Totally missed the point.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're missing the point if you're saying that. But more so of like, like if this is a gift, how can I use this? And why is this here for me?
Yeah. Oh, I love those. Those are fantastic tools. I'm so happy that you clarified them because now I feel like people could be like, okay, like those are interesting. Like, let me go and research one of those and like learn more about it and then have it, in my toolbox of emotional wellness and self-care, which I think is really beautiful.
Yes, it's got to come first. You have got to come first, right? I really believe that. And a lot of the work you do, I'd say you have a ton of tools too. Right behind you, you've got tools.
Okay. Yeah, all the tools.
All of that, the little magic shop has a lot of tools. So use all that.
Yeah, I'm all about emotional wellness tools. All right, this was so awesome, Emileena. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and magic with us today. So here at the Magic Hour, we always end an episode with 3 Feed Your Soul questions. I just love to hear more about how people care for themselves spiritually and emotionally. So would you mind answering a couple of them for us?
Yeah, I love it.
So, are there any consistent activities or rituals you do to maintain a sense of inner peace?
Yeah, well, meditation. I dance. I have like a little dance party for myself almost every night. I try to because it gets me. That's my movement. Getting my blood flowing.
Mm-hmm.
Those are probably my 2 biggest ones. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I feel like especially with, quarantine and not being able to like go out and be about, like, I feel like having a little dance party for yourself is just like so freeing. It just gets your energy moving, gives you a reason to smile and laugh. I love it. Beautiful. Now I'm going to forever just like think of you having dance parties every night.
Yeah, I love it.
I love it. When it comes to self-development, what are the books or tools that really offered life-changing discoveries for you? So I know you had mentioned a couple, so you just want to throw another 1 or 2 out would be amazing.
Well, a big one for me was Butterflies Are Free to Fly by Stephen Davis. He wasn't a writer, so it's not written that great, but it's mind-blowing. I really loved that one. And Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. Those are 2. Oh, and then I also follow Russell Brand. I really like his videos and his perspective, and he's very much an artist, so I kind of resonate with that frenetic energy.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. I just started watching his YouTube channel recently, and I'm like, this guy's pretty, like, what I appreciate most about him is how curious he is. He seems to come from a place of like pure curiosity. Like, yes. I want to understand, even like, and I'm ignorant about stuff, but I want to know. Tell me, correct me if I'm wrong. And I appreciate that humility of
yes, me too.
Okay, absolutely. And then the third question is, when you are in an emotional rut, what are your go-to ways to bring yourself out of that feeling?
Okay. Cleanse my energy probably first to make sure what I'm dealing with. And then also I learned from a spiritual biz coach who happens to be my coach, Kimberly Maska. She's got this great little technique about that transmutes your energy. So I try to take anything negative I'm feeling and feed it gratitude and then take the power back, because when you're feeling something bad, it's a hard time, then it's like you're not coming from a place of power. And so this idea of transmuting it and like it's a whole process of like finding where it is you're feeling it in your body, taking it out of your body, feeding gratitude, and then sucking it back in. And transmuting it into power. I love that one. That one has worked wonders for me. And then the third one is to just feel it, like cry. I cry a lot, and I get it out. Like, don't run away from your emotions. And I don't run away from it anymore. I feel grateful for it if it's there. I used to push it away. I don't have time for it. I don't want to deal with it right now. And some days I still have to wait till I get home. Like, I can't just break down into tears on the subway, but yeah, I try to feel it. I know, I guess I could. Yeah.
I'm like, if it happens, whatever.
Yeah, it's true.
Thank you so much, Emileena. Again, this was just such a magical chat. Can you tell our listeners how they can follow you on your adventures?
Yes, please. I'm probably most active on Instagram, which is at TSGO Prods for Productions. The show goes on Productions. I'm also on Twitter. Actually, Twitter, I have a personal one, which is at Emileena Pedigo. So definitely follow me on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook at TSGO Prods. And my website is www.showgoesonproductions.com. And my blog is on there, and you can sign up for updates on the book. I'm going to be releasing it actually in 4 parts. So you'll get an email notification about each part as they come out if you want to sign up for that, which is really exciting.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to the Magic Hour podcast. If you want to learn more, you can find us on our website, www.mylittlemagicshop.com, and follow us on our Instagram at mylittlemagicshop. See you next time.